Hey, Paul, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Good morning. Well, the first thing I want to tell you about myself is I'm a huge fan of your LinkedIn videos. I love them. They are right to the point and they're funny, and I just am a fan. So I'll get over the fanboy stuff in 10 seconds. So I am a master practitioner and trainer of neurolinguistic programming. For those of you who don't know what that is, my opinion is the study of how language structures consciousness, shapes decisions, and drives behavior. And my whole orientation as a hypnotist, as a matter of fact, I used to be a dating coach, is about how do we create the states of consciousness in our prospects through which they're far more likely to receive our traditional sales process. So the question I teach my students is, before you present your sales plan or whatever it is, first stop and think, what states do I want my prospects in? How do I create states of fascination, of a desire to follow me, of a willingness to believe, of unbreakable rapport? And how can I do it quickly and systematically? So that's me, and I've been a student of the human mind and language since I can remember.
And what made you curious about this?
Well, I have an interesting and unique and unusual story. I was I was someone who could not get a date all the way into my mid-20s, and I searched for answers to this and couldn't find it. I just tried therapy, I tried prayer, and then I discovered NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and it took me about 2 years to get over my horrible lack of communication skills, my terrifically bad self-esteem. And I thought, hey, you know what? I'm tired of working as a paralegal and a part-time real estate salesperson. I could teach other guys how to do this. So I began to be a dating coach. I actually built a multi-million-dollar empire doing that. And then over time, what happened, Brian, if I can give a tiny bit of the history, I don't want to, is I started to get emails from students saying, you know what, Paul, I've been using your stuff for sales and I'm crushing it. I'm like doubling what I used to do. So I spent about 2 or 3 years mapping it over into selling, and then started getting private clients here and there. And it really does map over.
Completely.
Essentially it's sales like a date, or
Yeah.
to be really out there, it's like a seduction.
Well, it's talking to a stranger, right? And
Right? And
and even all the stuff, the pickup stuff is based off NLP.
well, you've got to qualify. First of all, you got to do your outreach, your cold calling, so to speak. You've got to qualify or disqualify your prospects. You have to get rapport, and then you have to get them excited about the idea. Then you have to do, forgive me, the close, and then you have to handle objections, and
Yeah.
also put up with a lot of no. There's a lot of no.
And I think it also gets to the core of kind of the statement that I have, is that people don't think, they react. And
Yes.
and a lot of people sell at the thinking stage, at what I call the human stage instead of the mammal stage.
Well, I would say I think that's a brilliant way to look at it. One way I would look at it in a complementary way is people make their decisions largely on the unconscious or subconscious level. And then they give rationalizations
Right.
for why they did it. It's fundamentally a hypnotic process. So as a hypnotist, someone who's trained to do hypnosis, if I put you in trance and said, when I say the word watermelon, you're just going to talk in your shoe like it's a telephone, and you accepted that suggestion and you started to do the behavior, I'd say, why are you talking into your shoe? And you would come up with an excuse. You'd say, I
Right.
don't know, I just felt like being a kid and playing and pretending it was a telephone. So we're not going to go that far deeply, but I think when we sell, we're appealing to the unconscious or subconscious level of our prospect. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't be proud of what we do, and it's not to say that we shouldn't be in service. But to me, if all you think about is being in service, you're going to lose leadership. To me, selling is about service times suggestion. The effective use of suggestion will take any sales process that's working for you and 2x it or 3x it.
Yeah. And a lot of people today are saying that rapport isn't necessary.
I think rapport is overrated. I think what's far more important is a response frame of mind. How do we get the prospect responsive to us? Now, rapport may or may not be necessary, but if that's the first thing you aim at, then you're in trouble. I really think rapport is overrated and it's ill-defined. And there are times, as you know, I watch you. I know that this is your way of thinking. There are times when you have to break rapport and get confrontational.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily bad, but
No.
you got to kind of start where the other person is.
Yes, correct. You can't move a person from where they're not. You have to move them from where they are. And you said something brilliant. You said people come from reaction. I want to build on that point, because one of the things in NLP and in hypnosis is the idea of a pattern interrupt, that people respond and think in fixed patterns. If you can interrupt that pattern, they become suggestible and leadable. I first learned this doing dating coaching, if I can tell a brief story.
Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I had a client who paid me a tidy sum of cash to take him out, and we were at a restaurant with a patio area, and he was just I felt so embarrassed and humiliated for this guy. He was just striking out horribly. At the end of the evening, about 1 a.m, because I couldn't stand watching him just get shredded, we're waiting for a cab, and I looked over, I said, oh, there's a young lady waiting for her cab. And it went in the wrong way for some reason. She proceeded to swear at me like a sailor drunk on 10 bottles of whiskey. He got very angry. The veins on his neck bulged out. He went to give her a piece of his mind. I stopped him. I said, no. She can come from wherever she likes. We decide where we come from. Look at her. She's someone's daughter. She's someone's sister. She's someone's best friend. Somewhere she's deeply loved. Now, in that moment, her expected pattern was for me to yell at her or to beg for her forgiveness. I broke her expectations. She came over, threw her arms around me, wept, and said, I'm so sorry. That was the most beautiful thing. I love you. People have been pigs to me all night long. Men have been pigs. Thank you. What's your name? I extended my hand. I said, Mr. Wonderful, here's our cab, and off we went. Yeah. But the point of the story is I interrupted her expected pattern. She expected me to beg or to attack back, and I broke her pattern with just 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Now, if you can take someone who's absolutely enraged, and in a matter of, it was about 30 seconds of dialogue, turn her into someone who loves you. You can take a prospect who doesn't trust you or who's objecting and turn them around into someone who's in a state where they want to buy, if you can stay neutral. Because what I didn't do there is get all empathetic and cry along with her. I would have lost leadership. You have to find a balance between feeling enough compassion. I don't believe in empathy or sympathy. If you have empathy, you'll feel their anger, you'll feel their hesitation. If you have sympathy, you'll buy their story. But if you have compassion, you can say, okay, I see, they're just someone who needs to get more information to see it's a good decision. It's my job to lead them from a calm, neutral place.
I like that word compassion, because I think what's missing in sales today is this outward mindset, the ability to think like the other person. Not just feel, which is empathy, but the compassion for what they're going through.
Yes, without buying into their story,
right.
and still being able to interrupt their pattern. I love objections. One of my favorite things to teach is to teach how to handle objections. I have a hypnotic way to deal with it. This is not to say the traditional ways of dealing with it don't work. They do. Stick with your sales process. Just add this in. For example, if you get the objection, I need more time to think it over. We always hear this. And I'm sure you'll recognize that the big mistake is, okay, here's my card. That's like saying to someone who you asked for a date, okay, give me your number and I'll call you. Right, sure. So I like to interrupt the pattern. If someone says, I need more time to think it over, I say, I understand. Can I ask you a question? Have you ever had the experience of taking a long time to think something over and it still turned out to be a bad decision? Now, in that moment, there's like a moment of shock, because that's a universal experience. And I'll say, maybe it's not about time, but about the clarity you need to recognize you really can move forward today. So thinking about it like that, what concerns do we need to clear up? So it's a different approach. It's taking the traditional stuff, which is say, I understand it seems like we're not on the same page yet. Can you tell me what's getting in the way of your moving forward today? That's great, but I would rather put them in a suggestive state first by breaking their pattern.
Because they probably don't know. They haven't internalized it, cooked it up.
No,
they're like,
no, they're confused.
Yeah.
I think the two things that really are getting in our way as salespeople, and I think the biggest problem is your prospect is overwhelmed by all this input coming in, and more importantly, they just don't know how to focus. They're checked out.
Yeah.
They're completely checked out. Even if they start out interested, they have the attention span of goldfish.
Right.
I'm sure you remember when YouTube first came on and the ads were 2 minutes long.
Yep.
And now they're 15 seconds, and we have these things. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb for a couple hours to get work done, or I turn it off. We have instant message. We have Facebook. We have Tinder. I don't know anything about Tinder.
You don't need to.
Okay. No, look at me. So you get my point. And so we need to create those states of focus. And also, this is something I think the biggest problem is not that they don't trust you. They don't trust their own ability to make a good decision, unless they're very sophisticated. If you're doing business to business and you're dealing with a very sophisticated CEO, that's a different story. But a lot of prospects just don't trust their ability to make good decisions because they've been hammered with a lot of setbacks about what is a good decision. I remember the 2008 crash very well. And the old phrase, you can take it to the bank. Well, my bank was Washington Mutual. I don't know where are you located?
In the DC area.
Did you have Washington Mutual Bank out there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I remember Washington Mutual was my bank, and then one weekend the signs were down, and the next Monday it was Chase Bank. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? So even more now during COVID, this is a black swan event. Now people really don't trust what's a good decision because everything has crumbled around them.
And that's it. The natural thing is to think about it because people think time will help them make a decision. But
no, I don't think that's the case.
Right, because they still have to raise the issues internally with themselves. It's like to think through what they want to do. Now so you did the dating thing. Now you're moving it to sales?
Yeah, I've been moving into sales for quite some time, but I did sales when I was a kid. Yeah. I sold candy bars for my local school. And even then I understood the idea of pattern interrupts, because the first thing I did when they opened the door is, hi, I'm here to sell you something, which is a complete interruption. Usually it's make some small talk. They weren't expecting that. I'd hold up the candy bar. I'd say, it tastes great, and you'll feel really good because you know you're supporting the school, just like the kind of person you really know you are. And that, like, who the hell is this kid? Then I sold real estate, was not particularly good at it. And then I got into selling the dating coaching. I made lots of money doing that. Lots of money. I didn't make necessarily the best business decisions, but that's another skill set.
But the sales side, what do you see people doing wrong?
Number one thing is they're over-focusing on facts, data, figures, and they're not thinking about what states of consciousness do you want your prospects in, and what states of consciousness do you want to be in. I've looked at what's the difference between someone who's really good, and my preference, and quite frankly, if you're listening to this, I work with people who are already stars and want to become superstars. And the difference between a star and a superstar is the superstar, the champion, understands that they're interested in the sale, but they're invested in their skills. So one of the other big mistakes is that salespeople aren't in the right frame of mind. They bought into a lot of ideas about what the right frame of mind is and what it means to be confident as a salesperson. I learned this teaching guys who are completely clueless and helping them get up a learning curve. And I think a lot of what's taught about confidence is just ill-defined. Everyone says you need to be confident. Well, that's implying that confidence is like a personality trait or a fluid that you pour into your head instead of a practice that you do. And you also have to have a really good learning strategy. This is also something I've never seen taught in any sales training. But I had to develop it teaching these guys. I had to teach them how to teach themselves going up the learning curve, how to learn from every mistake. I am tired of hearing learn from your mistakes, but no one tells you how. No one gives you a process.
So what should the process be?
First of all, you have to cultivate a state of consciousness where you can look at what you've done without being invested in it. Okay. I teach all of my students to develop a meditation practice. It doesn't have to be intense. We're not trying to reach nirvana. We're just trying to reach a state of detachment, yep, where you can look at what you've done from a detached place, where you're no longer looking at your behavior through your patterns of thinking, but you can look at your patterns of thinking and have a clear look at your behavior. This requires cultivating that state of what I call witness consciousness. Now, these are bat bleep crazy ideas. I don't want to swear on your show. The idea of success at sales being about cultivating consciousness, expanding your consciousness and expanding the consciousness of your prospects is a crazy idea. It's outside the traditional paradigm. But I think it's only when you shatter the traditional paradigm that you begin to see results that are far beyond what you think you could have enjoyed.
Well, that's it, because learning what everyone does is justify what they did instead of learning from it.
Now, I want to be clear. That's absolutely true, and not but. I'm not putting down traditional sales trainings. You still have to do all the rest of it. Of course, you need to prospect. You need to qualify by asking the right questions. I like selling through asking the right questions. That's all true. I'm simply saying when you layer in recognizing, designing states of consciousness for yourself and your prospects, it's going to be a multiplier effect. Yeah. It's going to multiply the power of what you do. And I think it's missing. No one talks about creating states of consciousness. It's just my perspective as a hypnotist and someone who used this stuff to set myself free and work with the most clueless people you can imagine and people who are suffering.
Well, I mean, I think that state management's really important, because if you're in a weak state, both physically and mentally, it comes through. What are your feelings on the flow state and how to apply that?
I think the flow state, again, is you can't get there unless you learn detachment. You have to be detached from the outcome. You just have to be process oriented. Rather, I like this idea. I don't know if you're old enough to remember bifocals. These are reading glasses, but bifocals.
No, I'm way too young.
They had. Okay, well, sorry about that. The bifocals were, well, you look like you could be too young. I don't know. You're in good shape. You look like you take good care of yourself, sir. But bifocals, for those who don't know, were glasses, and the bottom half, I believe, was used to read close up, and the top half is used to see far away. And I think if you really want to stay motivated and get in the right state of mind, you need to have the ability to look at the next step right in front of you, but you also have to have the ability to look at the vision that's pulling you forward. And learning to get that balance between the two is something that my claim to fame is that I can uniquely teach people how to do. There's no one else who knows how to create that. And again, I want to emphasize one more time, I'm not putting down traditional sales processes. You have to do a lot of what's taught. I just think some of it no longer works as well, and a lot of it is archaic.
Yeah. And what was the motivation for the book?
The motivation for the book is I've been so fascinated by the power of language to influence. And I tried multiple times, to be transparent, since 2005 to really perfect this kind of system. And just around 2017, I thought, okay, I've got it. I've done enough iterations. I've beta tested it with enough clients. This is a good introduction to my work. And then also, to be transparent, up until COVID, I had a budding speaking career, and this is a great calling card. When you've got a book, it gives you serious gravitas when you approach event planners, and also when you're on stage. Being an author is a pretty high status thing, and it's also good for my dating life. when they say, what do you do? Well, I'm an author, no big deal. An author.
And let's get into the words. I mean, do you see people using the wrong words, or they should be using more of the senses-based words that NLP teaches, like find the modality, the
dominant one and that works?
I have found that finding the modality can work. And for those of you who don't know, NLP teaches visual, auditory, kinesthetic, that some people primarily process through visual words, some people process through auditory, some people process through kinesthetic. I found that's pretty clunky and it works in the seminar room, but then you have to focus on all these things.
Right.
I prefer to use words in a way that create subconscious states. I'll give you an example. Here's a crazy idea. What if you could create trust and rapport in the first two sentences of any meeting, any presentation, any pitch? So there are what I call implied relationship words. They are share, we, invite, explore. So before presenting a marketing plan, most people would say, well, before I show you this marketing plan, I just want to tell you, please ask any questions that come up. That is sort of framing it as you're doing something to someone.
Right.
I would say before we explore this marketing plan together, now let's stop right there. We explore together. What is that implying? We explore together.
We're doing it together.
It's implying a relationship. We're doing something together. Before we explore this together, I just want to say, please feel free to share the questions, not ask the questions, but share the questions. What's the difference between the subtle word share and the subtle word and the word ask?
Well, ask puts the onus on them. Share means we're in this together, that we're
exactly. We don't share things with people that we don't
like or
trust. And then I said, please, I just want to invite you. Do we extend invitations to people who we don't trust, who we don't? And an invitation also implies you're going to give them something valuable. So in the space of one sentence, we're creating rapport, we're creating trust, and even more subtly, we're creating the perception that we're the ones offering them something of value. When we say invite and share, we share something of value. When you extend an invitation, it means you're about to give a gift. So there's a lot going on there.
And I've noticed that you ask permission before you ask a question. You know, can I ask you a question? Now, is that important or is that?
I don't always do that. I do that when I'm, because granting permission means on an unconscious level, first of all, I'm showing them respect. And when they grant permission, it's more something that they're not quite committing to accepting, but something where they're going to drop their resistance to accepting.
So what do you see as the stage? Is it rapport, then trust?
I think it's, I think it would be deep focus and a sense of even willingness to be led, establishing that you're a leader by the way you use language in a clever way, because for every leader, there must be a
follower.
Exactly. So what's even better than getting rapport and trust is creating the unconscious perception that they really want to follow you. Wow, that's really big. If you can create in your prospect the idea that they don't just trust you and they're not just fascinated by what you have to say, but they're actually a follower of yours, now you enrolled them in a way better power dynamic throughout the whole sales process. I know this is bat bleep crazy stuff. I don't know, but then again, maybe it makes sense to you.
No, it's good. It's great stuff. What I've always found the challenge with teaching this is like, it's hard for people to change the words they use.
I have found it to be pretty significantly easy once you get them. Yes, once you get them motivated, and once you explain it in a way that's fascinating and humorous, and you use metaphor.
Yeah.
If you use metaphor to teach, then it makes it more easy for them to understand. Like the metaphor of an iceberg. Well, the mind isn't really an iceberg. That's just a metaphor. And the metaphor, it's like asking for a date or dating. People instantly see, oh yeah, you're right, I get it. So I use a lot of metaphor when I teach. Metaphor is a bridge from one way of understanding over into a new way of understanding, and it bypasses conscious resistance. Again, I'm a hypnotist. I'm always looking to bypass the conscious mind as much as possible.
Right, because the conscious mind is slower. It's a slave to the unconscious mind, regardless of what people.
Right. In any battle between the conscious and the unconscious mind is going to win. Hands down,
Every
that's the
time.
end of it. Every time.
Yeah.
Every time. So knowing that that's a fact, we may as well know how to systematically use that.
And what words does the unconscious mind, is it emotional words?
It can be words that evoke emotion, but I like to use what I call, I'm just going to say it, trans phrases. Like I would say something, as we're sharing this together, I don't know at what spot you might find yourself growing more and more interested in what it is we're sharing. But as that's taking place, I just invite you to recognize that maybe you can move forward today. So what does it mean to find yourself doing something, Brian? You ever just find yourself reaching in the refrigerator and think, what am I doing? I don't remember walking here. Do you ever just find yourself falling in love and then find yourself falling out of love and you think, what the heck was I thinking? Those kind of words imply a process that's going to take place on the unconscious level. There's no need to resist, and there's no possibility of resistance. So they're little subtle phrases I stick in there to create those hypnotic states of receptibility.
Kind of that Ericksonian hypnotized.
It's all based on the work of Milton Erickson. I think he was the grandfather of NLP, and he's the grandfather of NLP and the great grandfather of my work. Milton Erickson's daughter, they asked her about one of them, which one? She said, my father would be horrified.
Well, I mean, because the NLP stuff, I think so many authors try and make it too scientific.
They make it too complex. And also what works, here's something I want to point out to those of you who use NLP. I love NLP. I'm madly in love with it. And a lot of NLP only works in the seminar room. People self-select. They're raising their hands. They're paying all that money. They're traveling. They're taking time off work. And they're effectively saying, I want this to work on me. But when you're out there in the mean, brutal streets, the brutal truth about selling, people aren't interested in that stuff. They're not raising their hands. No. So what works I had the street fight NLP. I had to learn what's going to work when it comes. You think sales is brutal? Try dating. I had to learn what worked in the brutal world of dating, and also teaching guys who are really broken. I had to go down there and fist fight with their unconscious minds to get them to change. There was no time for theory and stuff that only worked in the seminar room. It had to work in the streets.
And how do you get over? Is it just practice? Because I noticed the same thing. Because in the seminar room, everything works because it's a contained petri dish. You go out into the real world, randomness.
It's dealing with chaos. Exactly. People have the vending machine theory of sales. You put in your quarter of preparing, your quarter of rapport, your quarter of prospecting, your quarter of closing, and push the button, and out comes the commission check. When in reality, sales can be chaotic. Anything can make that deal fall through. And people are chaotic. Recognizing chaos is a huge part of realistic confidence.
Yeah. And what do you hope people get out of the book?
I hope people get a completely new insight, first and foremost, of what it means to sell. To have a completely new way of looking at the process. And also, quite frankly, I hope they fall in love with language the way I have. And finally, it's a way of giving them a taste of what I can do for them, and that they'll find yourself as you listen, recognizing you want to contact me for more.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Well, you're trained. You're trained.
It was still pretty smooth.
I know. I've been doing this 30 years.
Cool. And how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I have a Facebook group, and when you join, I do Facebook live streams every week, and I'm also put videos in there and answer questions. It's a very active group, and we're growing, so it's a way to continue to learn from me practical tools as well as theory for free. It's easy. Go to speakerpaulross.com. That's speakerpaulross.com/group, and you'll be immediately taken to the group. You just have to answer 3 questions, easy questions, and you'll be a member, and you'll get to learn from me for free on a consistent basis. And a lot of people just are making really good money and improving their sales just by watching the free live streams.